Hi, I'm Janet Lucas. I am an English faculty member at Peninsula College. I work a great deal with the nursing program with nursing students. I'm a pre-nursing advisor, and this is the study skills presentation that I often give in the Nursing 100 class. So in this lecture, we're going to talk about three things. One is what to do in class to help you be a better student. The second is about studying and how to maximize your study time. And third is dealing with tests and test anxiety. Our first one is listening to lectures. This doesn't come automatically to people. And so the first thing that you can do to help yourself is to be ready to take notes immediately. The second you walk into class, sit down, open up your backpack, take out a piece of paper and a pen, and be poised to take notes. It also gives a good impression to your teacher, and you don't want to start taking notes halfway through the lecture. The lecture starts when it starts, so be ready when it starts. A difference between high school and college is that in high school, for the most part, the textbook is the subject matter expert. And what I mean by that is most high school teachers have some expertise in their field, but not the same as in college where the teacher is the subject matter expert. And that's not just because they're a college teacher, it's because many, if not most, of the teachers, including those at Peninsula College, have PhDs, which makes them a Dr. So-and-so. If you've ever wondered what Dr. So-and-so means, it means that they are an expert in their field such that they give new information to other scholars in that field, and not just to students, but to other scholars. So they're a real expert. And so you might wonder why the teacher is lecturing just from their experience or their own knowledge instead of the textbook. Well, that's why that is because they have subject matter expertise. And that's the answer to the next question. Why is he or she not lecturing on the book? Well, you can read the book yourself on your own time, and so why waste precious class time lecturing on it when you can lecture on fresh material and the college instructor's particular area of expertise or experience too. Input information in many ways, and what I mean by that is use as many parts of your body and parts of your perception to input the information. For example, when you're listening to a lecture, you're obviously hearing it, but you're also maybe seeing notes on an overhead, or you are seeing the lecturer's hand gestures, you're seeing what you write down on the piece of paper. You're also writing it down, and so that is what they call kinesthetic. It's you're learning by doing. And all three of those ways are ways to input information. So lectures are generally made up of main points, some subpoints, examples, and stories. And the more you listen to lectures, if you can divide it into those categories, you'll be able to know what to take notes on and not to have to listen or not to have to write down every single thing that the lecturer says, which is really hard to keep up with. And especially you wonder when they start telling stories, do I need to write down the story? Well, probably not. So this works kind of like an outline. And I'm not a big outliner. I wouldn't remember how to use Roman numerals or, which kind of, do I need A, B, C, or D to put on my outline. I use indentations. And what I do is I listen for the main points. There's usually going to be 2 or 3 main points under a general topic. And under each of those main points, they're probably talked about in a block of time. And in that block of time, they have subpoints. And so I try to write down the main points, and then I'll indent when I hear a subpoint. And the subpoints may have examples, right? So a lot of times I'll write down the examples. If they also have stories, like stories from my instructor's life, I don't necessarily write down the stories, but I focus on the main points, the subpoints, and often but not always the examples. You can train yourself to listen for these things. So another thing to do in class is to make sure to participate. And I know it's difficult when you're shy. But we really do want you to speak up in class. The discussions just run absolutely dry if nobody talks. And you do have something to say. Now, here's a story from my own life and an example, since you're listening to a lecture, of my life as a student. I've been a student for about 12 years, beginning from Peninsula College in the mid-1990s until the end of my PhD in 2011. When I first went to school, I was so shy. Every time I spoke up in class, I thought that whatever I said was dumb. And from my perspective now, it wasn't dumb, but I would give myself a really hard time and be kind of mean to myself, thinking that I had said something dumb. But I knew that I had to speak up in class, and so I made myself do it anyway. I set myself a goal that I will speak up in class one time this week in one class. And once I made that goal, the next week I would speak up in 2 classes. And I built it up over time to eventually, now I have no problem. Now I speak in front of a class for a living. You can do this too. Next, be an active group member. In Nursing 100, you are going to have a group project. It's just a fact that people flake out on group projects sometimes. Hopefully your group will not have someone who flakes out, and hopefully, especially, you won't flake out. Sometimes you just have to work with the other group members for an absent member, but as far as it is up to you, be an active group member. You may end up saving the assignment for yourself and your other colleague if you do have other group members who don't participate. Next, this seems obvious, but it's not. Attend class every day. Studies show that the more class you attend, the better your grades are, and it's not just because you show up. It's because we come to class, we teachers, prepared with lessons, and important lessons. We wouldn't get dressed up in these clothes and come every day if we weren't preparing something. And yet students will come up to us after they've missed a couple of days and they'll say, did I miss anything? Well, of course you missed something. And so, don't ask that question, but just attend class unless you absolutely can't. Don't make appointments during class time. Class time is class time. And you have other times to make appointments. I don't make appointments during class time. So just kind of keep that in mind where your personal life starts encroaching on your school life. School has to be a priority to be able to do well at it, and you have to do well at it to be able to get into the nursing program. So just keep that in mind. And all of these things relate to becoming a first-rate brand. Okay, what do I mean by a brand? I mean literally a brand. There's Safeway cornflakes and there are Kellogg's cornflakes. Most people think that the Kellogg's cornflakes are better for whatever reason. They may or may not be, but Kellogg's cornflakes charges more money for them. Another example is think of an iPhone and a track phone. Now, in the wider marketplace of stocks, Apple stock is enormously expensive, and track phone stocks, maybe not so much. Which is not to say that people don't use track phones, but don't be a lesser than brand. A student who makes themselves a good brand is the one when the teacher is looking out on the class, which we do every day. They are definitely not the ones with headphones in their ears. They're definitely not the ones lying on the desk looking like they're asleep. They're the ones that are sitting up straight, that are ready to take notes the minute they come into class. They're the ones who participate in discussions. They're the ones who attend almost every day unless they absolutely can't. Not only do you just need to be a good brand to help you be a better student, but you may want to ask one of us for a letter of recommendation at some point, or to be a reference for when you're applying to the nursing program. So just keep in mind that your behavior every day in class is not lost on us, and we think, ooh, good student, ooh, not so good student, student who cares, student who doesn't care. So you are a brand every day, whether you know it or not. So next is studying. We'll talk about studying. The first thing with studying is successful reading. Not everybody is used to reading a whole lot. Now, if you're not used to reading a whole lot, you probably approach a textbook and think to yourself, I'm going to read page 1 to page 50 and remember everything. That's just not how your brain works. There is a strategic way to read textbooks, and textbooks are actually set up in a way that indicates that they're not meant to be read from page 1 to page 50, even though the material, of course, is in chronological order in that way. But most textbooks, especially for science classes and anything but a novel, really, they have certain characteristics. They have chapter headings, they have subheadings, they have bolded words, study questions, photos, graphs, captions. They have end of chapter comprehension questions. They have end of chapter discussion questions. All of those things are there to guide your reading. Now, if instead of reading from page 1 to page 50, you skimmed the chapter first, you would know what to read for before you even started page 1. For example, on the first page of a chapter, often in textbooks, there's going to be a list of key concepts of that chapter, or even vocabulary words or something. Then, when you turn the page, there's going to be pictures with captions, there's going to be graphs, there's going to be headings and subheadings, all of those things, and skim over all that because that gives you an indication of what the chapter is talking about. And then go to the end where if you look at the questions, you have review questions. What are review questions? Review questions are what the author views as important pieces of content in that chapter. So if you read the review questions first, you know what to read for. What are you looking for? They outline the important points right there in the review questions. The discussion questions are a little bit different. The discussion questions are going to ask you to apply the concepts. They're going to ask you to connect the concepts to your life or to news stories or to the wider world, something like that. They're kind of, you could think of them as critical thinking questions that go beyond the content of the chapter and ask you to apply those things to your life. So read all those things first and then read the chapter. And when you're reading, don't expect yourself to remember everything that you read. Take your reading time in chunks of maybe 20 minutes and then get up and walk around or do something and then come back to it. And don't read paragraphs over and over. Just trust yourself to get the gist. And if you have to read a novel for a class, definitely just trust yourself to get the gist. You don't have to remember everything. And you're not going to, because your brain doesn't work that way. Oh yeah, and then read the chapter, which is what I just said. So, successful writing. Number one, first thing to do is read the assignment's directions carefully, especially in nursing. Don't go off on a tangent. Don't make any assumptions about what the assignment is. Read the assignment directions carefully. Related to that, write to the assignment without leaving anything out or adding unnecessary details. And especially the latter. You might think that, ooh, I need to add this really cool thing. It's not quite to the assignment, but I really want to add it because it's really neat. But if it's not to the assignment, you're not going to get extra credit for adding something that was not asked to be there, especially in the sciences. So answer the question, speak directly to the assignment. Next is make a specific point and support it. If the difference between a general point and a specific point is, you might say, nursing is a good field to get into. Well, good for who? And why is it good? And so on. If you are specific, you might say, nursing is a challenging field that offers many opportunities to the right person, such as an educator, a caregiver, an advocate. Remember those nursing roles that you either have or will learn about. That is a specific point. Nursing is a good field to get into is a general point. Make a specific point and support it. Next, take your paper to the Writing Center for feedback on the content. The Writing Center takes papers online and face-to-face, and you don't actually have to even have the document already written to come in there for help. If you're like me, you have probably been given an assignment and sometimes you don't quite understand what the teacher wants, or you don't know how to start it, or you don't know what to write. And people in the Writing Center can help you with that. They can also help you with editing, not to edit your paper for you, but to show you patterns of error and to make you a better writer, to help you through those rather than fixing it for you. Speaking of editing, you really need to pay attention to detail when editing. And see all these punctuation marks at the end of the sentences on these bullets in the PowerPoint presentation? Now, if this was just a big block of text, you want to make sure when you're paying attention to detail that you put those periods where they go, that you capitalize letters that need to be capitalized, that you don't capitalize letters that don't need to be capitalized, so on. Those little details, we do notice them, and especially in the business world, they're really going to notice them there, so make sure to pay attention to detail. Read your paper aloud with the punctuation. This goes a little bit to what I was saying just now. Make sure to read each one of those periods and pay attention to whether your voice rises or falls. When you're asking a question, your voice rises. Can we go to the store now? And when you're reading a sentence, your voice goes down. We're going to the store now. So at the end of each one of those sentences, when you hear your voice go down, that indicates a period goes there. It indicates the end of the sentence. Now, sometimes people don't know where to put the period. They put a comma in there instead, or they don't put anything. And if you hear your voice go down, like I was just demonstrating, and you don't see a punctuation mark there, then that tells you you have a problem. And so you have to pay attention to detail when you're proofreading it. A even better proofreading strategy is to have someone else read it aloud to you. And then that way they don't already have their paper in their head like you do. They're just reading what they see on the page. So next in regard to studying is organizing yourself. So there's a couple of things to do. One is to organize your notes. Do not stuff them in the bottom of your backpack, or don't just stuff them in your backpack, because if you stuff them in your backpack, they're going to get squashed into the bottom, and you go, wow, where was that assignment? How come I can't find it? And it's because it's squashed down into the bottom of your backpack. Now, I have a system, and it's a really simple system. I'm organized to a point. I have a 3-ring binder, and inside that 3-ring binder, I have a hole-punched peachy type folder, that for each class. And I label the folder for the name of each class, and I have some lined paper in the back, so I'm always ready to take notes. So inside each one of those peachy folders, on one side I put in printed material that came off of a printer. A lot of times that's the assignment. It's things that I've printed off myself from the class online. It's the syllabus, a reading, anything that I've gotten that is pre-printed. On the other side, I put handwritten stuff. In other words, the notes that I take in class. Do I organize it by date? Well, if I didn't have anything else to do in my life, I might do that. But I certainly, as a student, have had lots to do other than school. But I know that if I was in class that day on March 27th or whatever, that I took notes, and I am going to have something handwritten that day. And if I need to know something that's on the syllabus, the point value of an assignment or some sort of policy, I'm going to look in the printed stuff and it's going to be there. Next is to organize your time. And that you really need to make studying a priority. Set aside time. They say 2 hours of homework for every hour you're in class. That's pretty accurate, although it's an average. Sometimes you might need 5 hours of homework for 1 hour in class. And then the next day you might not have any homework for that class at all. But the point is that you have to have a time to do it. You have to make a time to do it. Many students have the idea that they can work full-time, be a parent, be a spouse, be a friend, and go to school full-time and still be successful. If you take that 2 hours of homework for every hour of class idea, and you're going to school full-time, if you extrapolate that out to how many hours that is in a week, it's 45 hours a week. That's more than a full-time job. How are you going to fit in? How are you going to fit all that in? Including class time. I mean, it's really challenging. So find a time to study. Make it a priority. I'll tell you a story as an example. There was a girl I worked with in the tutoring center one time who said that she did not have time to do homework. And the more we talked about it, the more she argued with me that she just did not have time to do it. And there was no talking to her about this, and I'm thinking, well, you can't be in college and not have time to do homework, because you have to do it. And so we kind of ended on that note. She came in about 3 weeks later telling me that she had found a way to do her homework. She had 3 children under 5, and so it was really hard for her to find the time. She was so tired by 7 p.m. by the time she put her kids to bed that she just couldn't do anything else so in the evening. So she started thinking, if I went to bed with my kids, got 8 hours of sleep, 7 to 3, I could get up at 3, and my kids don't really get up till 6 or so. or maybe even 7 if I'm lucky and they sleep in. I could probably get up at 3 and do my homework, and that's what she did, and that's how she graduated. I mean, if you think outside the box, if you don't have much time. And so that's how to organize your time. I can't necessarily tell you, except that you need to make it a priority. So, making the most of that study time that you have. Make studying a priority. If it's a priority in your life, you will do it. Anything that's a priority in your life, you do. The things that aren't a priority, you don't do. Just a fact. Next, make it a habit, and that is the argument for doing it the same time every day. It becomes a habit, and then it is less work to make it a priority because it's just part of your life. Next, develop a method that works for you. There are tons of study methods out there that you can just Google how to study, and you'll get the top 20 study tips or whatever. If studying with note cards, index cards to memorize terms, all of that kind of stuff works for you, then let it work for you. I think that it's less true than what students often think, that listening to music or watching TV at the same time that they study is an effective study aid. Yeah, I know a lot of people claim that they can't study without some background noise. I kind of like background noise in a restaurant where it's just kind of voices in the background, but I find if any one particular voice comes through, then that distracts me. Every time your attention is taken away, you're distracted and you have to bring it back. And so mainly, help yourself focus. So you'll have to work that study time around your schedule. I think studying in a quiet space is better. You may not. I think psychological studies disagree with you, but hey, do what you got to do. And I want to return to something that I mentioned just a few seconds ago, and about focusing. And I notice I bolded the word develop. Develop focused attention. Focused attention doesn't just happen. And you can't say, oh, I don't know how to, or whatever. It's like a skill. It's exercise. It's anything that you develop into a skill. Focused attention is one of those things that does not come naturally. It's almost not how our brains work, in a way, at least in certain circumstances, because brains are all about processing perception, and you have perceptions coming at you from all sorts of places, sound and sight and all of those things, all of our senses. But you really have to tune those out. So developing focused attention, it may just be for a few seconds at a time right now. It'll help if you turn off your cell phone. And I've got to say for myself that if I have my phone next to me when I'm grading papers and somebody texts me, it takes my attention away from the papers, and then even if I don't answer the text, I have to bring myself back every time, and I'm not that great at that, and so I turn it off. So that's the taking away the distractions. But you can also develop it by doing activities several times a week, or even once a day if you have time, that are those kinds of activities where you lose track of time. Some people lose track of time by reading, but they lose track of time because they've put focused attention on whatever it is that they're doing. For some people, it's running. They lose track of time when they're running because they've developed focused attention on it. There are certain disciplines like martial arts and yoga and Tai Chi, things like that, that meditation, that are meant to develop focused attention. And it really does work. So take up one of those too if you think that that would help you and you have time to do it. You would benefit in lots of ways. So next on our agenda is testing, and the first thing that we're going to talk about is test anxiety, because that is the first thing that people talk to me about when they talk about taking tests, is they are either nervous or they experience panic, and maybe one leads to the other sometimes. However, these two are not the same thing. If you think you're not going to be nervous before a test, you need to realize that if the test has any meaning to you, which hopefully it does, you're going to be nervous. But panic is where your mind absolutely goes blank. And the whole rest of this section is all about really reducing your panic. If you do everything else that I suggest in the rest of the lecture, you will reduce your chances of panic a great deal. And even some of the things before the lecture, like we were just talking about meditation and that kind of thing, those things are meant to reduce panic and anxiety. Now, key suggestions for test success. The best defense is a good offense, which means be prepared. That means prepare every day for the test by developing consistent study habits. If you study for your class every day, even though something is not due the next day, even though you don't have to write a paper or take a quiz the next day, if you study a little bit every single day, you will be prepared for that test. Now, when you think about tests, especially in college, like tests in high school might have been memorizing terms. And if you can memorize the terms and repeat the terms on a piece of paper or do a matching exercise where you match the term to the definition, you're done. The end. That is not so true in college. In fact, it's not true at all. You're going to be asked to apply information and apply the terms. Some people think that this is not a fair way to test. Well, it is fair because words, vocabulary are meant to be used in a context, and especially in the sciences. You think of mitosis as a word, you might know what it means, but it is used in applying it to all sorts of functions in your body when you think about cells. Do practice questions. A lot of textbooks will have practice questions in the back, and not only that, with the internet, often textbook publishers will have practice tests, they will have practice quizzes, all kinds of things, and you can make up your own questions too, and especially if you work with a study group, you can quiz each other. Don't cram for tests. Have consistent study habits. Now, that's not to say don't study extra the night before. I always study extra the night before whenever I'm going to take a test, but that's different than not studying at all and then studying only the night before the test. You're not going to be very successful. Make sure and eat well and go to bed at your regular time. Right? If you're tired and if you haven't eaten, your brain doesn't work as well because your brain functions on food and it functions on a certain amount of sleep every day. I find as a teacher, when I don't get enough sleep, which is relatively regularly, unfortunately, but I come into class and I lose my train of thought. I can't think of words. All kinds of things happen when I haven't had a good night's sleep. Well, imagine if I was taking a test at that time. That wouldn't make me do very well on the test. One last thing, and I didn't put this in one of the bullet points, and that is as you're sitting there finishing your test, don't worry about the people who leave early, because those people are virtually never the ones who do the best on the test. Usually the people who do best in the test and have the best grades in the class are the ones who are sitting there till the absolute last possible moment. So just keep that in mind. So you might ask your instructor some questions before you take the test. Don't ask, especially in the middle of the lecture, is this going to be on the test? It's a distraction. Ask if you can use scratch paper, like if you have a math class or something like that. Sometimes math instructors, or perhaps chemistry or somewhere else in the sciences, they might even let you have a chart of formulas or something like that. But ask what kind of resources you can use and if you can use scratch paper. Next, ask the instructor what he or she wants you to learn from it. What's the point of this test? We're assessing some body of knowledge on your part, right? And so we have goals for the test. We don't just test because, that's what teachers are supposed to do. We want you to know something. You can ask what types of questions that he or she will ask also. Are they matching? Are they multiple choice? Will there be essay questions? Is it a mix? And ask if he or she wants you to know the concepts, the application of the concepts, definitions, etc. What do they want you to know? Find a time to ask these things. Not the middle of a lecture is not the right time to ask. But a few minutes at the beginning of class or the few minutes at the end of class or something would be good. You could ask your instructor at the beginning of class and just say something like, Dr. So-and-so, do you have a few minutes to discuss the test sometime today so we can ask you some questions? And almost always, I can't imagine that I would not make time for that. And I'm sure that your instructors will make time. So keep in mind when you're taking a test that there are no trick questions, but there are thinking questions. We aren't here to pull tricks on you, right? Who cares? We're beyond trick questions. That's your perception of a question that is hard, and you think because it's hard for you that we're trying to trick you somehow. Why would I waste my time doing that? My precious time is little enough as it is, then that to think that I would find some way to trick you, that is just not true. Now, I may ask you to think. I may ask you the question in an opposite way of what you expect. For example, I might ask the question in a negative way. I might say, which one is not mitosis, for example? A, B, C, or D, or all of the above. I might even have more than one answer, something like that. These are not trick questions, they're thinking questions. Questions that ask you to apply knowledge rather than just repeat a definition are also not trick questions. They are application questions. Next, be sure to read the question thoroughly and understand it. Of all of the things that students don't spend much time at, and that is reading. And you have to understand the question before you can really answer it and find the right answer. So make sure to read the question thoroughly and understand it. It's the same thing as writing to the assignment. Remember when I said that a while ago? Make sure to read the question thoroughly. Next, we're going to talk about types of tests. Some tests are over lectures, some tests are over the book, some are over both. That tells you that whenever the teacher is talking, even if he or she isn't writing down anything on the board, you should be taking notes. You still need to be reading the textbook. You can ask that question, is this going to be over the lectures or over the books, when you have a question and answer session about the test. So, types of test questions: short answer, multiple choice, matching, essay. There's lots of other different types of test questions. Short answer are usually asking you to articulate a quick definition. Multiple choice, maybe one choice in four. It might be two choices in four. It might be three choices and or three answers and among six choices. But it's a multiple choice. Matching, you're usually matching definitions, and an essay question is just a mini handwritten essay. When you're actually taking the test, before the test, do whatever you got to do to make yourself feel better. Meditate, visualize, breathe deep, pray. Face away from the clock. Yes, I know you feel time pressure, but the time is the time, regardless, and it is going to pass regardless. And if you have, suppose you had a minute per question or 2 minutes per question, and you're sitting there and you're facing the clock, and every 5 or 10 seconds you're looking at that clock. So there's a couple of seconds to think about it, a couple of seconds to look up, a couple of seconds to have anxiety about what time it is, a couple of seconds to look back down, a couple of seconds to get your attention back on it. Look at how much time you've wasted every time you look at that clock. Plus, you're adding to your anxiety. Face away from the clock. The first thing that you should do is look over the whole test briefly. No, you can't read every single question, but you can look it over briefly to get an idea of what kind of questions are asked and where they are. Next, don't go from question 1 to question 50, right? So what if question 1 is the hardest one on the test? What are you going to do then? Then panic sets in, right? So answer the questions you know first. When you're doing an electronic test, you don't have any choice with that. You're going to have to answer the first question. But pen and paper tests, most tests, you can just go through and answer the ones you know. Next, answer the ones you're pretty sure of. Next, answer the ones you're not so sure of, but use the guidelines below. Answer the ones you don't know if and only if guessing will benefit you. Some standardized tests penalize guessing. And believe it or not, like SAT tests and maybe even the NCLEX exam, I really don't know that for a fact, so don't quote me on that. But many standardized tests don't like you to guess. So find out whether they do. You probably will not run into that if it's a test that's just generated from your teacher, from the teacher of your class. That will probably not happen. However, yeah, standardized tests, they definitely do that. So those are some suggestions there. And go back over your test at the end, and I want to reiterate a point that I talked about a little while ago, which is don't think because you are not the first person done with your test that you have failed it. That is so not true. The first people out of the class are not the ones who do the best on it. They might be the ones who didn't know any of the answers, and if you freak out over them leaving early, you don't know that their whole test is blank, or that they answered C for every single question because they were partying all week and didn't study, right? So take your time, slow down, go back over your test. You usually have the whole hour, the whole class period, whatever. You have plenty of time to go back over it and check your answers. Yet, don't overthink it either and then change all your answers because you're insecure. But the best students are the ones who are staying until the absolute last minute just to make sure that their answers are the right ones. So, short answer questions are about key definitions and concepts for the most part, ones that you can answer in just a few words. Be able to apply them. You notice I give this advice over and over again. College tests are not about repeating definitions. You have to be able to know where they fit. In multiple choice questions, typically there are 4 choices. In a 4-choice multiple choice test, 2 are called distractors, 2 of the answers, and 2 of the answers are similar. One of those similar answers is almost right, and one is completely right. Don't choose the one that's almost right. If it's almost right but a little bit wrong, it's not the right answer. Okay, so choose the one that is completely right. When in doubt, just generally, choose the more comprehensive answer. Is that always true? No, not necessarily, but sometimes it can be. Avoid, most of the time, answers with the words never, always, all, none, or only. Those are almost never going to be the correct answers. Notice I say almost never because I use the word never because they might not be never the correct answer. Watch out for negative questions. So negative questions means which one is not mitosis? Okay, so that's an example of a negative question. Watch out for questions with multiple answers, A and B, A, B, and C, all of the above, none of the above. Whenever you answer those, both A and B have to be completely correct, not almost right, completely right. A, B, and C. A has to be completely right, B has to be completely right, C has to be completely right. Same thing with all of the above and none of the above. If they're not the answer. With essay questions, keep it simple. Use the 5-paragraph essay structure. Introduction, 3 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. A little bit more, a little bit less, depending on the test, right? Spend the least amount of time on your introduction and conclusion, and the most amount of time on your body paragraphs. Address the question directly. Same thing as I said about succeeding in writing assignments where you write specifically to the assignment. In this one, address the question directly. Next, make a claim and support it. And by support, use examples. Say the words, for example. One problem that I have encountered over and over again in both typewritten essays and essay questions is making a claim and then stating the claim over and over and over again in different ways without giving any examples or explaining the examples. So what that is really just repetition. Don't repeat yourself to fill space, okay? So you have a 900-word essay, which is way too long for an essay test, right? But students will repeat themselves just to fill space. Don't do that. You need examples and you need details. So with other test suggestions, learn from the first test you take. So when you have a new class, new teacher, the first test you take is probably going to be your least successful one if you're paying attention, because you don't know the testing style of that instructor. Once you know the testing style, then you at least know what kinds of questions to expect. If possible, once you go on, review the tests you've taken, see how many answers you've changed and what you've changed them to. From wrong to right, you had a tendency to misread the question. If you changed answers from right to wrong, you tend to doubt yourself and trust your instincts. Or you need to trust your instincts more.